Hey everybody, I am here with Amine from Marseille, who makes the mCable, mClassic, and some new products are coming up. How are you?
Very good, my friend. Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much for taking the time to do this. You and I have already spoke once before, so pretty sure we both know what to expect. But for everybody else listening, I want to kind of get into the origin story of your products, talk
Awesome.
about the ones that have been out for a while, and then of course talk about the newer products that you have coming out in a little bit.
Sounds good.
I've always had the opinion, and obviously I mean this with respect, but your M cable and the M Classic were like tools in a toolbox. So,
Correct.
if you use a really nice screwdriver to have a really nice, the correct size Phillips head screw, beautiful. But, if you try to use a flathead on a Phillips head, you can make it
Uh-uh.
work, but, and I mean that I mean that with love and respect, right? There are many
Yeah,
scenarios in which I think the original cable that I have a lot of experience with made the games better. And there are some times that, it's up to you, but that's why you have the off switch. So
that's correct. That's correct. No,
cool.
I think
So
I
mhm.
go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to say, let's just jump in and could you kind of talk about the origin of where this product came from and your ideas for it and all that other stuff? The
Yeah,
original
I
product, I mean.
yeah, I think first of all, I really appreciate the call. I highly regard some of the I started to check some of your channel, and it's a pleasure to see somebody who really make an effort to understand technology. And I mean, look at your background. Behind me is a homemade 4K TV that was built by Marseille engineers many years back. But basically, the background and I like the way you present it. Yes, it's a massive algorithm that it's a set of tool sets, and like any tools, the more you know, the more you can take advantage of it, right? But you can use the tool for the wrong purpose, and it's not going to get the job done, right?
Mhm.
So the origin of it is born. Long story short, Marseille has been in business since 2005. We're still in Silicon Valley, a group of engineers and scientists who come from video background. And the idea behind was really to revolutionize the semiconductor industry. We started to develop a lot of internal tools to develop what we used to call virtual silicon. Long story short, out of necessity, somehow we ended up developing one of our first virtual silicon was a video chipset. And the idea was in real time, you could reconfigure the chip before going into manufacturing. That's the real backbone of the company. Now,
So when you say
the
that,
TV,
this is actually very interesting, and I'm sorry. I apologize to you and everybody listening. I'm gonna interrupt a lot because I want to learn more about this stuff.
I
So,
appreciate, I
um,
appreciate. No, no, go for it, go for it. Don't be
yeah.
shy.
So when you say a chip that could be reprogrammed before manufacturing, are you talking about? So you're obviously not talking about something like an ASIC, which is now just
Now,
a hard coded chip. So is it something like using an FPGA to program
n-
this, or is it kind of halfway in
so
between?
yeah, that's a good question. So at that time, if you remember, in early 2000, 99 2000, a lot of engineers like me I got the privilege to work with massive hardware acceleration. When NVIDIA was in early stage, C-Cube was basically the video chip company in Silicon
Mhm.
Valley. That was the first, that's where really video really started. There's not a single video company now that you're not going to find C-Cube engineers, right?
Mhm.
The idea behind of the virtual silicon was by 2000, the complexity of the chip got to a point where the engineers like me who were working closely with the algorithm, hardware acceleration, what we called the video firmware at that time, where basically you're going to have to control the hardware, it was becoming very complex to a point where when you look at the process it takes to build a chip, if you needed to wait for the customer to validate the chip once the chip is taped out, when it's an ASIC or an ASSP, an application specific standard product, what's going to happen is too often we will tape out, and by the time the chip become reality, it will have the wrong features, the wrong interface. And in order to shrink the process, what we started to say, one of the bottleneck became the speed of simulation. So
Mhm.
what ended up happening in the industry, you had two train of thought. You have two basically trend. One was I'm going to accelerate the simulation by simply developing, System C was a language at that time that was coming in. But basically the idea is like a model of the chip. There was another school of thought that was says, no, hardware has to be real. We need emulation system, which was a massive, hardware acceleration card where you have multiple FPGA and you're going to take the chip design and distribute it across multiple FPGA. I had an emulation system, $1 million emulation system at time to model the chip.
Mhm.
And Marseille came in and says, you know what? Neither It's good to have an emulation system. It's good to have a pure system model, but we need a hybrid platform. And this is what we developed, which was, a tool actually to develop the chipset, a hybrid platform that has the benefit of an emulator and have the benefit of a software acceleration. And in real time, and this is how I ended up going all around the world, in Taiwan, in Korea, in Japan, eventually in China, showing in real time how 4K could look like before 4K didn't even exist. That chip was neither an FPGA, was neither a software model, it was a hybrid system that will allow you to be able to experience. And the idea behind was you can't defeat the physics. By the time you get manufacturers, it will be optimal from a performance, from a cost, from a power consumption. And this is how actually Marseille chipset was born.
And you're talking early 2000s for this?
Early
That's
2000
very ahead of
emulation.
its time. Yeah.
I'm telling you, by the time the fork, and that's why, it's, I'll be very clear with you. I just had my birthday a couple days ago, and
Happy birthday.
I got a, thank you so much, and I got a vinyl record, a record player, right?
Mhm.
I mean, come on, brother. I mean, the sound is
Yeah.
incredible. So the thing is that, in engineering, sometimes we just hit it right.
Mhm.
And this new methodology that we developed that made that the algorithm, the chip performance, but like you said, like you started, I really like the way you started the call saying, I mean, mClassic, mCable is really a set of tools. I mean,
Mhm.
and this is true. This is spot on. And by developing this methodology, we ended up coming up with a chip that has massive hardware acceleration to do something that hasn't been done before. I'll be very clear with you, Bob, and I'm sure we'll have time to diving into it. I used to be highly paid as an engineer for fixing problems that 90% of people, 99% of people won't be able to see,
Mhm.
because you know how it evolved. Picture quality is like, it's not something that it's not the obvious. It's very easy to make to change every single pixel from red to pink or from black to white, and everybody's going to see a difference. That's not what we are paid for. It's
Mhm.
the same as in music, where that sound, like, and I was floored to relive the experience of a vinyl record, like, oh my God, you must be kidding.
Vinyl
This is,
record is an excellent analogy because the reason that so many vinyl records sound better is one of the many reasons. But if you're mixing, mastering, and recording for the intent to be listened to on vinyl, that's going to be the best experience. Just like if you're creating a video game and all of your testing and all of your development is on CRTs, that's where it's going to look best at.
yeah.
And that's why vinyl is often better. And that's also why brand new albums that come out that are recorded digitally often don't sound as good
No,
on vinyl as they do with the 24-bit, like, mastered for iTunes type of stuff. So it's a perfect analogy for this
no,
conversation.
and it's true. And once we get into the RGB collection, that's where I got, I told you before, like, I've seen so many. I'm not a gamer. I come from the video background. I come from the algorithm, from the science. I've a physics background before becoming an engineer, right?
Mhm,
So, but I appreciate content. I appreciate, like, that visual experience. For me, it's addictive. The brain is, it's not that most of people don't, pardon my French, but they don't care about picture quality. They don't give a shit about picture quality,
yeah,
except that is addictive. Because the real world, if you and I right now we record it, it's that experience is magic compared to 20 years ago if we do a video call, right? But the
mhm,
reality, when you get in real world, that experience is, so the mind is accommodating. Is that just, like, basically, if you way back 20 years back, when we've seen DVD the first time, we were like floored. This was
mhm,
magic. How comes that today you look at it and you like wonder, I mean, you must be kidding. So the brain
yeah,
is super powerful. I mean, it's
mhm,
amazing what it can do, the tricks that it can do. And for me, what's fascinating about picture quality is we want to get closer and closer. We want to get real. And once the mind has been exposed to, and that's why, I'm wearing those glasses, now, because the mind knows that I can see more. And
mhm,
I'm spoiled. No matter how inexpensive are those glasses, that's what's going to happen, right?
right.
So, so I think it's quite interesting, and I think you touch on something that uh, it's like that experience. When we talk about the analogy of gaming, I'll be the first one to tell you when a bunch of retro gamers surrounding Marseille, and and a big shout out to that community, especially the collector, especially the early adopter, because we don't realize if this guy were not around, we will forget it. Look at the background you have. So I tell you, big shout out to Jesse, who come with its tiny CRT, and he's telling me, I mean, for me, retro gaming, hands down on a CRT TV. I said, you must be kidding, dude. I moved in Silicon Valley in 1996. I've been trained. I've been, going from analog to digital. We've done everything we could to create this magical experience. And yes, it's flat, it's big screen, and all this thing. But I was the first one to admit when I saw some of the retro game console connected to a tiny CRT screen, it's mind blowing.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah, I
start
think
to
much
realize, and
like,
Bob, I let you speak,
yeah.
but it's mind blowing. You start to realize that, dude, their color that didn't even exist, that vibe that you get, that experience that you get, the game, and that's where my mind started to spin and said, I think we think that it's the same as the vinyl, right?
Yeah.
You forget, right?
But I
Go
mean,
ahead.
this is exactly where products like the original mClassic come in, because it's anybody that takes a decent CRT, not a beat up one that you found in a junk bin, but one that looks good, and you play these retro games on it. Anybody that cares even a little bit is going to go, "Oh yeah, that's definitely better." However, exactly like vinyl, if are you going to take a bunch of old vinyl records and then go through the process of cleaning them, because you need at the very least a good brush. I have the project one, but you could get into ultrasonic cleaners, and then you got to get a good vinyl player. Then you need to get a good head for it, but then of course you need to get the correct preamp and everything. I mean, are you really going to spend well over $1,000 to listen to records? Many people go, yes, that's the experience I want.
Yeah,
I want to restore a classic car. I want to go
yeah,
get old original artwork. But most people are going to go, no, I'm going to go over to your house and listen to it, but I'm going to go home and listen to it on my phone, and through
correct,
that.
correct.
And that's the same. That's why you need stuff like all the RetroTink products. You need stuff like the M
Yeah,
cable, because everybody might agree that it's better, but it's like, no, I have this $2,500 OLED TV I bought. I want to use that. But why do these games look crappy? And why do the early 3D graphics look so horrible? Why can't I smooth those
mm.
out? So I think that's the perfect transition to. So how did you go from making these incredibly complicated, probably very expensive hybrid processors to then moving on to the original M cable?
So what happened is two things. Number one, I want to go back to your first question, which was, so we started. I told you about the background of the company and so on. Then what ended up happening, and this is how mCable was born, actually, how the chip was born, and we became this fabless semiconductor. So what happened is all the panel makers, TV makers around the world started to see what we could do in 4K,
Hmm.
and very quickly, we realized that the history is repeating. Way back when HDTV came out, some of the early adopter of the early customer at Best Buy went to the store in US, bought an HDTV, they brought it home, they connected with their CRTs, with their VCR, and they started to call the support line of Best Buy, say the TV is not working.
Hmm.
And Best Buy is panicking. What the heck is wrong? What the heck? What is talking about this guy? And then the moral of the story was the TV looks amazing in the store, but the source itself is not a source that was optimal for the HDTV. And as a result of that, it didn't look right. When 4K
Even
TV,
cable boxes, not even VCRs, even the cable
no,
boxes that
no,
people
no,
used to have to
and
spend a lot of money every month
no
on. Yeah.
comment, no comment, 100%. So and from the mid 90s to 2005, I've been involved in so many video chipset company, including C-Cube. So very familiar with like behind the scene. So then what ended up happening was, you know how are we going to explain to the mass market that 4K TV, that HD content look worse, and not forgive DVD or 720p streaming content? How are you going to explain to me that it looks better on an HD TV than on a 4K TV? That's not conceivable. I paid more, it's bigger, it's got to be better. But
Mhm.
the reality is that, when you have content that was optimal looking on a 500,000 pixel display or 2 million pixel display, and all of a sudden you come in 8 million pixel, yeah, if I go to Costco and I show you a 4K native on 4K TV, it's going to look amazing. So of course, then every TV manufacturer started to create a great marketing campaign around 4K upscaler, right?
Mhm.
So the idea was, can you develop something that's going to make that all this legacy content is gonna look at least as good as it looks on HDTV, but it cannot look worse.
Mhm.
That's how Marseille started to develop all this massive, taking advantage of our virtual silicon platform. We started to reconfigure the chip, iteration, 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 until we hit a home run. We bump into Technicolor, one of the most trusted technology house in Hollywood for the last 100 years. In Technicolor, there's one thing that you can give them credit. It's basically the production, what they've
Mhm.
done, not the marketing. Marseille, we suck at marketing. Forget it, man. I'm telling you, I come physics background, engineers. I love sales. I learn sales on the street. But at the end of the day, let's get real. Marketing is like, it's a go and explain to, it's not where we come from. That's not what we do well. People being like, when we launched the mClassic, the world first graphics card. Come on, it's not a graphics card. It's shit, man. How do you want me to explain what it is? What do you want me
Yeah,
to? You get a PC. The only reason why you get a new graphics card to have better graphics. I'm giving you better graphics. What do you want me to call it? So it's been very, very
yeah,
difficult.
we
But
should pause for a second and talk about that because you did bring that up, and I will fully admit that I did tease you guys a little bit, but I also understand what it's like to create a product from scratch. And when people said these things are scams, there's no possible way a company is doing what you did to try to trick gamers into buying something. That's not a thing. But I do understand the frustration because there were a lot of people out there. See, who you get to promote your products is equal to the marketing. And there were a lot of people out there that were just saying things like, "Oh yeah, plug this into your GameCube."
oh my god.
But you can't plug it into your GameCube. You need something like you need some kind of converter or scaler to get in
Uh,
there. And now there's things like a Carby where you just plug it in and you're good to go. But so I get all that, and I did kind of feel your pain at the beginning. And I always wished that you would reach out to a couple of experts in the field who would kind of help walk you through that, because I saw where you were going for with this, but I also saw how so many people just didn't get it.
this was brutal because so what happened is we bump into Technicolor. And literally, we did something which was, like in video, there's a lot of French engineer in video. I don't know why, but it's like
Hmm.
because of the signal processing and all that. And we had my classmate actually was brilliant engineer who decided to do this stupid demo. I mean, since then I tried to stop it. That should be off record. We brought one of the colorists of Technicolor, and we did something that I regretted. So we say, you know what? We're going to bring two 4K screen side by side, and we're going to take Life of Pi. Forget DVD, we're taking Blu-ray, nice quality, 10 megapixel, a megabit per second, 10 to 20, some good quality content. And what we're going to do, we're going to go through the processing of Marseille, 1080p 24, 4K 24, and we're going to take Life of Pi in 4K side by side and let him decide to see what he likes best. And of course, he liked better the HD of Marseille. And this
Hmm.
was not a good, so it was kind of like the French engineer was like, can you guess which one you like? And shit, instead of saying the 4K native Life of Pi, native resolution looks way better than, 1080p Blu-ray upscale to 4K by Marseille 4K 24. Come on, the native should
Yeah.
be better. But
Hmm.
actually, because of some of the algorithm, some of the thing that we do, contextual processing that we do, it's not that the 4K native has it should be superior, but some of the effect makes that actually the upscale version was better than native. That's how we closed this crazy strategic partnership with Technicolor, which became the first company in the world who received 4K image certified by Technicolor. Why Technicolor did 4K image certified by Technicolor? Because for them was pretty clear. 4K TV are coming out. There's no content. How are we going to make sure this time that the content is, don't call it 4K if it's not 4K?
Yeah. So
Then
I
we
gotta
took,
just pause a second too, because there's gonna be people going, "Wait, it doesn't do 4K." So
oh my God,
yeah,
don't,
4K
like,
24,
but,
4K
but
24
this
is
is
the
something
same
that
bandwidth as lower. Yeah.
I'm telling you, brother, this is something that, how hard it is for me when I know I kind of like, I give up that battle. Like I have gamers who say, no, don't say 4K. I'm like, first of all, from an algorithm standpoint, I want to be very clear. the algorithm is not limited to frame rate.
Mhm.
Internally, the chip itself, the bottleneck of the chip is the HDMI receiver and transmitter.
Right.
The HDMI but the fundamental for us, of course, if you give it 1080p 24, it's gonna go to 4K. If you give it, so the only because of HDMI bottleneck, the maximum you can get over HDMI 1.4 is 1440p 60
At 60 hertz.
at
So
60.
that's the thing that gamers need to hear is when your
Correct.
cables detect a 60 hertz signal, it can go up to 1440p 60, but
Exactly.
when it detects a 24p signal, like almost all movie
It
and
can go
TV
to 4K.
content, then it goes to 4K
Yeah,
24, which is
but it's
HDMI 1.4 limitations.
correct.
And
And
that's something that happens even on TVs. That OLED TV behind me has a 120 hertz panel, but because the HDMI chipset isn't 120 hertz compatible, the only time that matters is when it automatically scales 24p
Of
content
course,
with
but
motion. Yeah.
and also, Bob, remember why did we got into 120 on the TV? I'm not talking on a monitor on the TV. Again, is when the technology we went into LED LCD. This is where we started to create. Basically, you're going after same time. The 120 hertz was, we need to refresh faster than 60, but it was not a true 120. That's where the FRC frame rate conversion comes in, the same as the upscaling. I mean,
Right.
so yeah, so the thing for me, it's so painful because you're looking at the chip, you say, of course, no, the chip that, and but you need to. But I also understand this is why I'm super, super thankful for the early adopters and for people like you who they're gonna go and make the effort to unpeel the onion to make sure that eventually, by the time you hit the mass market, people will be able to enjoy it. There's this great Simon Sinek, like, the guy who done a lot of interesting video, who makes some, who talk about the why, that famous circle, the why, the how, and the what. And he's saying if there was no early adopter, we will still have the rotary phone. So for me, I'm be very clear with you, even though it's hard, it's difficult sometimes to have everybody has an opinion or misreading what we communicated, and then we've done a lot of mistake from a marketing standpoint. It's forget it. This is not our department. This is not what we shine on, right? And we went out. So, but at the end of the day, what's more important is so many customers have been able to benefit from this product, and it's getting to a point where we need hopefully to get this into the mainstream, allow
Yeah.
everybody, because you said something very
Well, let's
important.
keep going then. Let's just keep going on the origin and how it works because I definitely want to keep I want to go through everything and I want to make
Please.
sure I don't waste any of your time. So you have this product. It's the original M cable. Yeah, you work from Technicolor now. You make it into a cable itself. The original product wasn't a dongle; it was a cable where you could buy in multiple lengths. And the processing on that. Now, to my eyes, it looked like a combination of a very advanced anti-aliasing smoother, which I know I don't mean to insult you by that. I know that's oversimplifying it, but it also looked like it had what I saw in the Darby depth processing. So like the luminance based depth edition that kind of gives you a feel of depth in it. It kind of felt like it was doing both of those things at the same time. Am I getting this right? Or
Yes. So that's another thing which is extremely challenging to explain.
Mhm.
Marketing, they want to be able to say it's got anti-aliasing, noise reduction, upscaling. You know, what we're trying to do, we're trying to simplify massive algorithm, a pipeline architecture where the chip itself is not designed like this block, this block, this block. That's the marketer who they're gonna go and try to simplifying. But one of the things that it has that so you can recognize some of the tool, you can recognize the anti-aliasing is unique. I
Mhm.
mean, what it does in terms of that one who have been long enough in this industry where people knows the anti-aliasing of Marseille is amazing.
Yeah.
The upscaling, Technicolor speak. I don't need to, we've done some benchmark with some AI upscaler over the years, and what it does, it's amazing. But I
Mhm.
think one of the magic of beside the anti-aliasing, beside the upscaling, beside noise reduction, I think is this thing that make it really, really unique is the contextual processing.
Mhm.
And the contextual processing with the depth of field processing. So the depth of field processing, it's something that you don't see in video. People can claim, they can talk all day long, but at the end of the day, you can ask any expert and you can look at it closely, and you're going to see that Marseille have developed something that It's not in video. It's in the best analogy that you have is in camera. When you capture content and the camera is going to be able to do different processing based on the zone of interest. So
Mhm.
the foreground, the background, this is a patent technology that Marseille have developed over the years. And what it does, that's where the mind has, something that is unique, is able to decouple, the object of interest. That's one thing. And on top of that, the depth in the video itself.
Mhm.
That's something that is unique in the processing of Marseille.
Yeah, the
In
only other time I'd ever seen anything that looked like it was the Dolby processing built into Oppo Blu-ray players. They had one line of players that, and I think where I remember seeing it really stand out was in its processing of 3D images. To really, it really helped with the depth of 3D images. It also looked just good everywhere else, and that was the one of the things that came to mind when I first
Hundred
saw the
percent,
mCable.
100%.
Yeah.
There was this is where you some of the way back, Yves Farrugia, another French engineer who came out with those they were none in video processing, some technique that, and we really took it to another level.
Mm.
The other thing that is super 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 important when you talk about Marseille that you cannot forget. I'm the crazy guy who went and challenged the entire army of engineers that said, you know what? I don't want lag time. I don't want latency.
I was just getting into this, but you continue.
Good. This is sick.
Mhm.
So when you do,
Why
when
wait,
you,
hold on, why did you even think to say that? Because in the context of movies and TV, latency doesn't matter at all, but it's incredibly
that's
important with gaming.
that, that's a good question. One of the reasons why that initially for us the architecture is going to fit in because of virtual silicon is going to fit in so many platforms, including mobile, including tablet, including.
Oh,
So the
excellent.
idea was from the get-go, low power, latency, no lag,
Mhm,
and magic processing. This was insane. Listen, I started my career way back in 95 in Switzerland, working on a supercomputer, the Cray 256 processor, where we were doing wavelet compression, subband decomposition, right? Trying to go, so we always been, I'm looking at, so I started by looking on 3D processing, so basically what I mean is 2D, the spatial, right? An
mhm,
image. And then, of course, you use the unfair advantage of temporal. And by having the temporal, now you have more information because remember, like what we're trying to do, we're trying to create information. That's
mhm,
another element that is super, super important to understand, which is crazy. So, first is the moment you want to create information, you are at the mercy to create misinformation. All of us experience at one point in time, you get a streaming experience and the video become blocky everywhere because there was one error that was generated in the bit stream. And as a result of that, that error propagates and it grows exponentially and you get a big issue on the screen. So the idea behind is that how can you prevent? Because when you say 4K image certified by Technicolor, it doesn't just mean that it's a beautiful picture. It
mhm.
means that you are also no artifact.
Right.
So temporal, the idea of temporal, there's two reasons. There was the low power, there was this, but also the temporal is if I detect misinformation when I create a pixel, it's gonna propagate. So be able to take that, be able to have no lag, it also means no temporal. If I'm not doing temporal processing and I'm doing it completely different, I'm not, adding that lag, all of a sudden, I am not gonna have error that propagates into the video. And that is a big, big, big deal. But
It is.
nobody does it because it's too hard. Because
Yeah.
it's insane, and that's why the TV, when the TV manufacturer started to discover the gaming world, and they said, "Oh my God, oh shit, we gotta do game mode." And that's why a moment you take your LG OLED or any TV, you go into game mode. Now the picture is dull because
Mhm.
all the processing is gone,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah,
where my go ahead.
it's kinda crazy to think, even companies like Sony, where the PlayStation 2 was such a huge source of revenue for them, their original flat panel TVs didn't take gaming into consideration at all,
No,
even though it was such a big source of revenue. So, to see somebody come at this with, latency in mind, even though you weren't focused on gaming in the beginning was is really impressive. And I remember when people were first asking me what I thought, I said, "I haven't seen it yet, but let's see how much lag that thing has." And I would laugh out loud when I saw the 0 come up on that.
I'm
So
I'm telling I'm
that was
telling you,
funny to
Bob. I
see.
mean, the engineers in Marseille, it was crazy. It was like, and I mean, over the years, how many people could not? I mean, it was for 5 years. We heard like, it's bullshit. It's too good to be true. But I mean,
Mm.
behind the scene, we were visiting every single manufacturers in Taiwan, in Korea, in China, in Japan, of course. Over the years, and every time you have to go and, I mean, you know how difficult it was for Toshiba of record, the cell processor, to go and realize what the heck is wrong with these people. What are you telling me? This is bullshit. This is impossible that this chip does this. There's no way. And we went head to head with the cell processor, which was this massive, processor at that time doing all this amazing algorithm. But the net result, it could not compete.
That's
And
funny.
yet, no lag.
And didn't your latency or I'm sorry, not latency, didn't your marketing materials say something about how the chipset itself runs at 120 hertz, which is how it's able to process the image, even though
Which
it's
is
spitting it
true,
out
which is
24?
true.
Right.
Which,
Yeah.
the thing, Bob, the thing which is crazy is that, and I think Linus Tech did an amazing job too. Big shout out to Linus Tech, because I mean, honestly, helped us tremendously, right? At that time where, I mean, it was crazy. It was like, but uh, it, every statement that has been made, you can say, oh, it's bullshit. Marketing is saying. But I can tell you one thing, I'm an engineer, bro. I don't joke with this thing, right? So the truth is there's always something behind it. The problem is that if you take it out of context, you're not going to understand. So the processor is able to do at 120 hertz, is able to take 1080p, 60, dual redraw every single pixel, and all of a sudden, upscaling, the bottleneck is the HDMI. Now,
Right.
now of course, we have a design internally that can do a 4K 120, and it's mind blowing. But I mean, do you want to go and tape out that chip?
Yeah, that's so there are just a couple of things for the layman, because just to let you know, my general audience are our fellow nerds, which I say with love, obviously, but there are a lot of people that are just kind of into this stuff, but they're not experts and they don't have the time to be. So I
And
always
that's
like
why
to
I
fill in the
appreciate that you
blanks.
do what you do.
Yeah. So you have never ever claimed that this runs at 120 hertz. Never. But it was in the marketing material, so that did kind of confuse people. What you're just saying is that it's processing it so fast, and that's how it's able to do all of this conversion within the time frame of a 60 hertz output.
Correct.
So totally get that part. Also, so basically, you have this cable. People are talking about it, and then people are realizing you could use it for gaming. So then you come out with the mClassic, right?
Correct.
So now there's what exactly is the blue mode doing? Because that's one of the things. While I have screenshot after screenshot of a lossless capture showing exactly what the green mode can do, there are two things that I've never been able to really lock on is what the blue mode's doing and the 1440p mode. I've actually never gotten working, and I've
Ah, man.
tried, I don't
Yeah.
know, 15
So,
capture cards, 20 different HDMI spoofers, EDID spoofers. It's never output in 1440 for me.
wow. So,
Yeah,
okay. So, two things. So number one, the M cable didn't have the blue mode. The M cable had
right.
only one mode, right? Which was, and also the M cable was not doing 1440p. So the M
Okay.
Classic comes in, and the M Classic, the idea behind was like, let's cut the cord, marketing to market a cable. We're not a cable company, so it's like it's already hard as an innovator to come up. Forget the cable. Let people pick and choose what they like. If they want to have their own cable, you don't have to sell to give them a cable. Give them the processor. And on
Mhm.
top of that, then we went on and we created the blue mode and we created 1440p. Let's start with the blue mode. The blue mode is where we start to meet the retro gaming community.
Mhm.
Discover GameCube, discover Dreamcast, discover this. And that's where you start to see that, the processing itself, all this content, and never intended to, when we say plug and play, for us, it's plug and play over HDMI. But of course, when you go and you say to some of the retro gamers, I mean, the connoisseur, they know they all have already their adapter. They haven't give up there. But when you go and you say to the mass market and you go and say, hey, it's plug and play, you've got a guy who's got a GameCube in the attic dusting off, they buy the mClassic, and they're going to be pissed. And what the hell are you telling me? You told me it's plug and play. No, you need to have the GCHG adapter. You need to have, and Marseille never wanted to go and we didn't see the value to go and build those adapters because there are enough companies solving that problem. Let
Right.
them grow. There's no, it's not seen as an area. We wanted to deliver something that is unique and bring value to the end customers without having to go and wipe out, all this company, which it makes no sense to me. But
Mhm.
long story short, the retro, it became very clear that the processing in order to really get injustice, number one, the aspect ratio had to be right. It was
Mhm.
4:3, it was not 16:9. So we needed to start to say, okay, you know what? There is this amazing content with is retro, with the right adapter, it's going to come a clean 480p. If it's interlace content, it's going to be passed through because we no lag. So obviously, we're not doing the deinterlacer, motion compacity. We have algorithm that this, but it will add lag time. So we ignore it. So we pass through. But as long as you give us a 480p signal within that aspect ratio, with the processing is going to be fine-tuned to make sure that your 4:3, your GameCube, your Dreamcast looks amazing on a modern display. That's
Mhm.
how we started. Then we saw that 1440p for gamers, it's an amazing resolution. And very quickly, we learned the hard way that not every TV are able to support it,
Right.
which sucks, which, was, yeah, but again, you tell me, so first, imagine the challenge for us as a company, right? We go and say, like when mCable came out, people started to say, oh my God, amazing, it's going to fix my TV. Oh shit. Go,
Yeah.
go, go
Right.
and go and say that the TV is not doing its job, you're dead, right? So it was like, listen, now we are here, get the best display that you can afford. We're going to try to feed it with the best content, the higher quality content, and you're going to get a better visual experience. So the 4K TV, they were not all supporting 1440p. Now, the good news, Bob, is I'm blown away. Finally, 5 years later, you start to have some the Chinese TV manufacturers starting to really get their act together. Hisense looking good, man. I mean, side story: the remote controls Hisense control the LG OLED. I don't know what this means, but but in all honesty, they really made an effort for game mod, right?
But what is the requirement for 1440p? It should just be an EDID handshake, right?
100%. It's bullshit.
Weird.
So no, okay, correct. Except the devil is in the detail. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, I know.
So you
I
have
just skipped past that. What I meant was if your display is capable of handling 1440p input and can either display it or scale it like for a 4K. Like if you could take a computer set to 1440p and
mm,
plug it into a display and it works, what, that's
except
you
one
know,
detail, except
right.
one important detail, Bob. 100%. First is the nightmare of EDID, right?
Yes.
HDMI is a finical protocol. So, like for example, you're gonna see on some forum, oh my God, mClassic doesn't work with Hisense. Oh shit. This. So Samsung over the years at one point in time, because of the protocol itself is finical. So sometimes you need to adjust, you need to fix it, and over the years it get better and better and better. So I'm glad that a lot of problem we're finding ways to outsmart the TV.
Mhm.
In terms of 1440p, you're right and you're wrong, but you're more right than wrong. You're right that, dude, the idiot, the display should be over HDMI 1.4. And by the way, if you are compatible HDMI 2.1 or after that, you're supposed to be backward compatible. So any 4K TV, technically speaking, should be able to support, as long as HDMI 1.4 compliant, 1440p resolution. Now the problem is that video is very conservative. So this is where, so the protocol say, yes, give me 1440p. But now the TV SoC, now remember what happened. Nobody wants to spend money on the the TV manufacturer have been putting, like you buy an iPhone, you spend thousands of dollars for a phone, but you will spend a couple hundred for a TV. So as a
Mhm.
result of that, what we started to see, every TV has to have the same SoC, system on a chip. Now that chipset, how was it architected? It's the same as Marseille when Marseille say, "Oh, we support 4K." No, duh, no, you're not doing 4K. Bullshit, right? But no,
Yeah.
I know my chip can do. But now the chip itself is physically taped out. If the chip itself is not able to, it was not designed to, it was pre-configured to upscale a finite set of resolution. He
Mhm.
doesn't know how to handle. He doesn't have the frame buffer for 1440p. He doesn't have to. He doesn't know. So he was designed to upscale 1080p, but nothing else to
Huh.
4K. But he's not able to take 1440p as an input and upscale it because
That's
nobody,
interesting. Have you
because
used the
nobody,
AverMedia Live Gamer 4K capture card? It's the most powerful, affordable capture card I've ever used, and it could do fully uncompressed 4K 60.
but
So it's
but you see, there's
able to
different.
handle the
But you
bandwidth,
see,
but it can't do it doesn't detect the mCable as a 1440p compatible device. So the
so
mCable only does 1080p with that one. So
so so
that's an interesting example.
so
Sorry,
there's
continue.
couple things. First is the TV chipset. Is
Mhm.
he able to? Is not because he can display 4K that the architect, when the chip was taped out, when the chip was manufactured, was he the video designer was like, what are the format that I support? 480p, 720p, 1080p, 4K. And then the gaming community comes in and said, dude, what the heck is wrong with you? The specs support 1440p. So from an EDID standpoint, you're right. Now from an architecture standpoint, now the good news is finally you're starting to see more and more TV supporting. Now you still need to go and hack it. We just did a couple of video on our channel. It's not our priority, but we tried, right? Once in a while, I was on a video explaining that, you can take Hisense, you can take TCL, and you need to go in the settings and force the HDMI input port to support 1440p, and the result is amazing.
Hmm. Okay.
Now, now there is the input capturing it 1440p and then be able to upscaling it, right? Now, the result is mind blowing because now you're going for 1440p from Marseille to 4K and it looks good. Now, in terms of capture, it's also a different problem statement. But there are two areas. There was the one which is from the EDID standpoint, are able to over HDMI protocol, are they able to really, this is what I support, this is what you support, tack, 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 the handshake and renegotiate, and I'll get you the best experience. Uh, you know, and basically that's kind of the reason why you didn't see 1440p. But the good news is finally we're starting to see more and more TV where you can outsmart the TV, reconfigure the TV to support 1440p, and for gamers, it looks amazing.
Hmm. To go back to the blue mode for a moment, though, I think one misconception that people have said, and I don't think Marseille has ever said this, by the
No,
way,
no
but
problem, no
you
problem.
got to remember that when you have YouTubers talking about this thing and it kind of takes off, what they say turns into what the product is, even if it's not true or not. But a lot of people were saying there was the blue mode was sharp scaling. And in all of the analysis I've done, there's no way that's an integer based nearest neighbor scaling, which is actually something that would be amazingly helpful in the retro scene. So is it just kind of bilinear sharp or your own algorithm to try to scale it? Because the thing that I noticed was when I first heard somebody say that, I went, okay, well, I'm going to put in a 480p, a 720p, and a 1080p source. So
Mhm.
using something like the Mr. FPGA project or through a retro tank or something like that, and see how it scales it. But if it were true integer, then it wouldn't matter. It would all be sharp to whatever the target is. Whereas, as long as it's within a multiple of, but it wasn't that way. It was just the lower the input resolution, the softer the image. So or what kind of other things are built into the blue mode in order to focus on retro
So,
other than
so it's all
the
about
aspect?
the algorithm itself. It's a massive algorithm. There's
Mhm,
a lot of parameters that you can reconfigure for the algorithm to, in terms of sharp, in terms of edges, in terms of edge removal, in terms of noise, in terms of, so 4080p source, very often they're going to have a lot of challenges that you don't see in 1080p. And that's why,
mhm,
by the way, the result, the more work there is to be done, the more you're going to appreciate the algorithm. So on
mhm,
480p, there's a lot of processing that is turned on that you will not be able to see on a 1080p source,
mhm,
right? And again, like we're trying to oversimplify from a marketing standpoint, sharpening, anti-aliasing, noise reduction, depth of field processing is our own beast. But idea behind is really knowing that the source is 480p. There's certain, there's a lot of context. There's a lot of information that we expect from the source that is going to be tackled. And this is why the experience is different.
okay.
Cool?
Yeah. Did you talk to anybody, any of the experts in the retro gaming world for things that we were missing and looking for, or was this kind of like you and your engineers trying to come up with your own spin on it?
I think it's a good question. I think no, I think it was we could have done a better job. We have a bunch of retro, enthusiasts who really love. For me, it make my day when I see a passionate. It's like in music, it's the same thing. When I see the gamer falling in love with what we do, I score. And I tell you a couple story. True story. I was in a gaming conference at one point in time. It was actually that gaming conference happened to be in France, and there was a firefighter, and that one killed me. I mean, like it was, and this guy was a firefighter for security, and was making sure this was a trade show, so he was there for security. So I looked at him, and I see that the guy is stuck on the GameCube. GameCube was connected to this massive screen, and that's like many years ago now. And I'm like, yeah, go ahead, try it. And he's like, no, 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 we're here for security. We're not allowed to touch equipment. But with a French attitude, of course, I said, come on, it's okay. Go ahead, try it. And the guy was literally melting down almost in tears because he hasn't played GameCube for 20 years. And playing GameCube with the mClassic, it was this amazing moment. This kind of stuff for me is game changing. So in terms of
Well,
the retro,
that's the perfect scenario right there though, because if you just have something like a Carby, a plug and play adapter made by an excellent company at a good price,
mm,
it pops out true digital to digital 480p from the GameCube, and then you use the green mode or the original M Cable Gaming Edition. That is the dream scenario of what your cable can do because it makes it
100%.
look and there's by the way, there's a lot more uses for it that I've always talked about, but I'm just saying that's the perfect example. But the retro side of things, I think, is where you've taken a lot of flack because of people's misunderstanding of it, and mine as well. Because the blue mode was really something that people had thought was focused on that lower resolution input. And that's it's not your fault if a bunch of YouTubers put out the wrong information, but I'm just letting you know that was the perception
Mm.
of the most of the community who was looking into these things.
And
So,
I want
mhm,
Bob, and I want to elaborate on the retro mode, right? So what ended up happening is that so the blue mode was really about like you have all this content in that need to be upscaled, need to be enhanced within its native resolution and native format, and this is what we've
right.
done. So you know, and the experience, and until today, you take your on a 40p source. I mean, you really have to be blind not to be able to see different. Now, what
Right.
was the feedback from the retro gaming community? Because we take, for me, the good, the bad, the ugly, we're not perfect. We make mistakes as well. But a lot of time it was like you understand well is, there's a lot of misunderstanding, miscommunication, and, it fire back and so on and so on. But that, I think what was important, what the feedback we received from the retro gaming community is like two things that we looked at. One was, I wish we have more 2D upscaler than a
Mhm.
3D upscaler. So for me, first reaction was, what do you mean by 2D upscaler? We are
Yeah,
working,
and that's a weird comment because there's a ton. The OSSC had already been out then, the RetroTink products had been out, the original FrameMeister and the XRGB too. I mean,
correct.
there's
So,
already a ton of
but they were
2D
saying like, they were
scalers.
so happy about what he does, but there was some people have, depending on the nature on the 3D games, hands down. On the 2D games, I would like to have maybe the pixelated effect. I want to preserve it. I don't want to have too smooth edges. I don't want to have. And we started to look at that. Fair. Why not? I mean, depends the game. So that was one feedback that we received on the original M Classic. Um, then I heard loud and clear, and I've seen it, experienced it myself, that the game actually, and this is where things was a complete game changer for the company. The game looks so different back in the days.
Yeah.
Take a CRT and you start to experience the game, and this became very clear to me that I was one of the first one with the designer in the room. Everybody was so excited to see him classic on the big screen. It was GameCube. Forgot like no, it was not GameCube. I don't recall which game console we used at the time, but basically on the big screen and on a small CRT. And I started to see that things were looking very different. The experience was very different. It was
Yeah, and
looking good.
there's a couple of reasons for that, just for anybody. I mean, anybody who follows me regularly already knows this, but for any new people listening, the a way a CRT works is a beam of light, and I'm oversimplifying, by the way, but a
That's
beam
fine.
of
That's fine.
light drawing one line at a time from left to right, from top to bottom. Your persistence of vision is what makes you think there's a full image there, but
Correct.
there actually isn't. Now, that single point of light moving that quickly means that every time one line is drawn, when it moves on to the next, that fades to black, which is what gives such amazing motion and no blur when things are scrolling across the
Mhm.
screen. And that's something that up until recently with OLED TVs and products like the RetroTink 4K Pro, you can't really recreate that experience
No.
because of it. And also, on the same time, the way those lines are drawn, and I won't go too nerdy into this because this could be a video in itself, but there's actually physical space between the light
Mm.
when you're drawing a 240p image. And that's what gives it a very strange sense of depth between it. And while your eyes can't see this stuff in real time, anybody who even doesn't care about video games or even really care about picture quality for TV shows can walk up to a CRT and see the difference from even a really good LCD panel.
Yeah.
So the chasing of CRTs is absolutely not nostalgia in any way.
No.
It's the fact that, I mean, I guess that's part of it, but when you really get into this stuff, right? When you're trying to use older content, just like your older vinyl records and everything else, what you're actually chasing is the lack of motion blur, plus the ability to see a very small resolution image on a larger screen
And
without destroying the look of that.
so in terms of expert, to go back to your question, which was so then we start to look at that and say the experience is different. So I was the
Mhm.
first one to, so a bunch of retro gamers around Marseille started to say, oh my God, are you kidding? I mean, if you can do this, if you can duplicate this kind of feel, this kind of vibe experience, that would be amazing. And that's on.
Um, and did you look into all of the other stuff that had already been doing that since the mClassic hit the market?
What I looked at, I'm going to tell you, what I looked at was I went back to the content. So I went back to actually had some serious discussion with production houses, with Technicolor, some of the former guys from Technicolor, and started to look and do a lot of research and says, you know, we love what we do. We love our tools. We love our algorithm. But let's try to get back to what is the magic of the experience. Because the thing that you said is, which is very important, is I think the brain, it's a very complex thing. What we really see, what we perceive, what we, there's a lot of things that you don't see, but you see somehow, you feel it, you react, it's complex, right?
Exactly.
And,
Yes.
it's not just, it's more, and that's why as an engineer, we've been highly paid to fix those problems that we think 99% of people they don't see. I mean, by the way, that's how the quality got degraded. No, what we used to say is that they cannot see the difference. Remove the information, compress it.
Right.
They
Well,
cannot hear the
just to let
difference.
you know though, that was a huge part of so yeah, I run RetroRGB, I do the YouTube stuff, but behind the scenes I still do consulting, I still do development work, and one of the biggest focuses that I've wanted to have was getting the feel of a CRT. And all of the experiments I've done with friends who don't care at all about this stuff, so many people ask, well, why do you care about these CRT masks and scan lines? Nobody wants to see black lines across their TV. But that's the secret. You don't actually see them if they're done correctly.
Mm,
If you do an image where you say, hey, let me watch this movie or play this video game.
that's
Hey,
fair.
go get another drink, go to the bathroom. You flip the switch while they're gone, and people come back and go, how come it didn't look as good as it did before? That's how you know you've got it right. Because if you get
100%.
it wrong, it's what are these lines all over the screen? And that is a misconception
And
that I
this
have
is,
still
yeah,
not been able to get
and
across to people.
and this is also, there's two things I like to cover on and go back to that discussion with Technicolor. But I think what's important is that this is where, picture quality, what we have in every company that is in this field, and know the have been focusing on the art and science of video processing. We have what we call the golden eye. There's
Mhm.
one guy who's just going to go and screen at every single pixel, because picture quality is not something that what we've done here in Classic, which is crazy, is you allow everybody to have an opinion on what is good. and
Right.
and what we aim for is not just to get you something pretty, is to recreate the content as originally intended. We aim for. But what I
Right.
want to be clear on, what became very clear, I said, okay, I don't care anti-aliasing, I don't care jaggy removal, I don't care edge detection, I don't care all this amazing thing that we have packaged into the chip. I want to understand what is the magic. What does what like, if your eyes could speak, they tell you this is what I need. So I went back and I says, okay, what defined an experience? And after study after study and study, it became very clear. The number one color, composition, lighting, camera angle, movement, and sound.
Mhm.
I said, you know what? We've got this amazing, like you said when we started the call, we have this tool. We
Mhm.
have this toolbox. I want to see how I can take advantage of all these tool sets that we have developed, all these algorithms, reconfigure them to be able to see how every single one of whether it's the color, whether it's the lighting, camera angle, movement, and sound, right? And the composition, how can we make sure we can recreate? The color was obvious. Actually, some Marseille engineers were really pissed the first time I told them, the color are off. What the heck are you talking about?
Yeah, now are you talking about so, this is a perfect transition. You're talking about into the new products that you
Correct.
just done so, yeah, that's really where I started to get very, very confused on this because, um, you know, this is what I do, right? And, to your point, you said the golden eye, the people who obsess over details. Your average person that has good working eyes, I don't mean that to be disrespectful. Some people just, you need glasses and you don't wear them. They'll see a difference. They just don't wanna pay for it unless it's within whatever budget their mind thinks is okay, which that's kind of funny because in the audiophile world, you could say something like, "Oh, and this is only $2,000," and that makes sense to some people, but everybody else is like, "What are you, crazy? I'm not spending 2 grand on a cable or something."
Correct.
But to going into this, so, you know, I saw what the devices did, and I just don't really understand it because you know, I do get the point that you realize that there are these other products out there, and you just went, "You know what? We've done so many good things on our own. Let's do our spin on all this stuff. Let's not copy what everybody else is doing." And that's cool, but there's certain things in there like the new retro version, the green mode. When I first started putting color bars into this, I thought the green mode was broken because it makes the blacks gray. It's almost exactly like if you're doing limited versus full HDMI color space.
Mm-hmm.
And even on the blue mode, funny enough, blue color starts to disappear when you start to put up color bars on it. So I couldn't understand what you were going for on that one. And can you give some insight into that? Because I
So,
have all the
so I think,
captures to
yeah.
kind of show
So
through
I
this.
think so. This one was, let's get out of what we used to our comfort zone, which is perfect match, input output. Now, of course, Bob, there could be also you had access to the pre-production sample. So we need
Yeah.
to, feed. We always take feedback serious, whether it's good or bad.
Okay.
We take it very, So it's always good to look into like so. So there's some concern, like the mod, for example. I don't know if you notice, but when you switch the mod, it doesn't remember the mod itself. You need to toggle it again. Like
Right.
when it says, so those they were
To
like,
be honest, I wasn't going to mention that because that seems like a pre-production problem, and I mean that with love. I mean that
yeah, yeah, no,
anybody
no,
that's ever
for sure,
built
but
products
you,
knows.
but
It's
you see
like,
what I mean. It's
yeah,
it's good to know. Like for example, we had issue with there was some issue with the Hisense CV, for example. The audio was not. There was some another HDMI, part of the Finacle protocol. How they
right.
interpret such, So no, we're always looking to make it better because we want to make it, But the idea behind was really, let's go out of our comfort zone and let's try to see what we realize the problem is extremely complex. You're
Mhm.
talking about, and a one size fits all is not going to cut it. And just looking at a color bar is not going to cut it. What we realized that couple things. Number one, the graphics processor of the era didn't have the capability that we have today.
Mhm.
Rendering was different. As a result of that, there are colors that didn't even exist at that time. They are like,
So, I mean, when you start to get into the late CRT era, the early 2000s, bottom of the barrel from Circuit City CRT produced color amazingly well. I mean, if you take that CRT today, you're gonna have to replace the capacitors for it to look good.
So so
It's
so
not gonna look
so,
great,
so
but
there's difference between what see what like now you I'm getting a flashback of an interesting off record meeting with Ubisoft PS4.
mhm,
Um, remember that I have this flashback memory where the game, one of the game that was we were doing some testing with the mCable at that time, and what you could see, you could clearly see that you take the PS4 at that time. PS4 is outputting 4K. mCable will go, 420 format. 4K will pass through. It looks good. We set up the PS4 to output 1080p. mCable will do the processing 1080p 60. We redraw every single pixel, 1080p 60 out, and actually it looks better on the 4K TV. And I was like, puzzled. And the Ubisoft engineer smiled. And then we started to talk about it. Is because, yeah, one thing that everybody forget is whoever is the game developer, he's got resources, he's got tools. And the challenge is within a time, especially in video, that it's not like, where you have the variable sync, where you have a fixed time.
mhm.
You have, in order to be able to be in real time, I've got 1/60 second, time to basically render a frame. The time is finite, right? So the processor itself, if I've got to render 8 million pixel versus 2 million pixel, as a game developer, I need to figure out where and how I allocate the resources to render. So when you were coming into Marseille, you didn't have to spend all this time rendering 8 million, you render 2 million. The game itself was better rendered. By the time Marseille did another layer on the 2 million pixel, and do all these preconditioned pixel that makes that when it's going to be upscaled by the TV, it became better than a 4K. So it's all about resource management. So the thing is, I'm losing the train of thought of what you're saying, but the idea behind was, it's it will come back. I'm sorry, you were saying something that
I
triggered
mean,
me that I wanted
I don't
to.
mean to put words in your mouth, but when I saw the way it looked, it almost was like, "Hey, I have this old CRT on my desk that looks shitty, so let me make this look shitty as well, so we can kinda match it," which is not what which it might be a proper representation of a 30-year-old TV today, but that TV when it was brand new absolutely didn't look like that.
So now I'm thanks. Now it's coming back. So the idea behind what we started to realize, we realized that the complexity, what Marseille is trying to resolve by allowing you to have all this configuration, and again, we're trying to make it simple. We're trying to make it plug and play. We're trying to make it like by just switching the free position. Hopefully, you find the right balance. So the idea behind that, you need to take into consideration not all TV are equal, not all game are rendered the same way, not all game console. And basically, you start to realize that depending on the era of the game itself, depending on the era of the game console, depending on the engineers who were utilizing the resources and the display that you're using, what is the optimal gameplay? And that's where it became like, on some display, it looks like that this game is optimal in mode 2 or in mode 1 or in mode 3. But and the idea behind was by simply changing the position, hopefully you will find an amazing experience every time. That
So
was the
now,
goal.
once again, I have the pre-production units here, so
Mm,
of the newer ones, and I'm specifically at this point talking about the mClassic Retro, the newer
right.
one that's not publicly released yet. We'll get to the Switch one soon because I have questions about that, and a lot of good stuff about that too. But if you talk about the original mClassic and you
Right.
have any game with 3D graphics on it,
Yeah.
I always tell people, if you own one, flip it on, see if you like it. If you like it, great. If you don't, flip it off. But there's no latency on it, and whatever your eyes prefer based on the game, that's great. With
100%.
the M Classic Retro, I tried a lot of different games, and I didn't just throw color bars through it. I can't think of a scenario in which you would ever want the green mode on. Let me double check. Well, let me have my yeah, the green mode and the blue mode. I still don't quite understand what it
And
offers over
also,
any other processor on the
yeah,
market.
and also, Bob, there's two things I would like to, and we can take this to another call or another session. I would love to see how we can get you to get 1440p, because also that's the other thing too, which make our a challenge for Marseille too. Two things. Number one, why did we over prioritize fixing the source versus going straight to 4K? That was one of the
Money.
things.
I don't think anybody listen, I don't mean to cut you off, but I don't think anybody understands how much it costs to go to 4K. It's not
No,
just about let's slap a 4K chip in there.
no, no,
That's not a thing.
no,
So,
no comment on that one, right? But on top of that, there's another thing that this is where we are focusing on something that hasn't been done.
mhm.
Garbage in, garbage out. So the idea behind is that without fixing the problem at the source, ain't not gonna work. So
But what if there isn't a problem at the source? Because
uh,
anybody that uses any of the newer FPGA based gaming consoles, which analog they make a ton of great ones. The Mister Project's amazing, but even with just basic processors like the original RetroTink 2K, I almost said 2K, the
to
2X, just the one that goes to 1440, that's still an excellent source, all things considered. It's got
but
all of the stuff in there.
so there's a lot of demo, there's a lot of content where the 2X from RetroThink with mClassic hands down. But I think at the end of the day, you're hitting something which is very important. The idea is not to if the because the algorithm need to decide whether or not it's worth it. The pixel need to be enhanced or not. The
Mhm.
content need to be redrawn. So I'm really glad that you're saying this, which is very important. At the end of the day, if the source itself doesn't need to be to be polished, to be enhanced, doesn't need to be the algorithm. His mission is not to create a shiny picture. If the source has no problem, it should look right. That's one of the challenge of the algorithm is throw any shit at it, and it's gonna have to figure out a way to make it better, including as good as it was. So that's super important to understand. This is why Marseille is very easy to create shiny pixel. That's not what we do. So the idea about
Okay.
very focused on the source. But one thing that's important, the more you give, and this is why some, for example, if you look on them classic switch, which is getting a
That's
lot.
exactly what I was gonna say is, why don't we move along to the Switch version? Because I think we should swing back at the end of this just to kind of talk about different ideas for the retro. The Switch edition, now in the green mode, and when I'm saying green and blue, just for anybody that hasn't used one of these, there's a physical switch on the side with an LED that glows green, blue, or off for the
Mhm.
pass-through mode. It seemed like, and maybe this is my eyes playing tricks on me, but after getting lossless captures, it seems like the green mode is almost identical to the original algorithm that you have, but tweaked a little bit in a good way, like a hair better than the original. Is that correct, or is that?
I think, Bob, listen, it's a culture of detail. That's very important. I mean, at the end of the day, you're not talking about. So it's going to depend the game. It's
Mhm.
going to depend. It's going to depend the display as well. But the idea behind is that yes, it's all about fine tuning the processing to get you a better visual experience. What we're finding out, we're running tons of tests, and you're seeing that depending on the game, you're going to find better on the mode. Are we running out of time?
No, I'm good.
No, I don't know. Oh, sorry, my screen pop up something like
Oh, okay.
So the thing is that it really depends the game. I don't know what Microsoft is giving a hard time. I don't want.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm saying this in a positive way. I
Yeah,
just mean that in the Switch edition, if you're in the green mode, it's essentially exactly like the M Classic, but it seems like you tweaked it a tiny bit just to kind of make it a little bit better, right?
at the end of the day, depending on the game, it's not about just tweaking a little bit or not. It's more about the algorithm has to be smart enough to figure out when to press, when not. And one thing that's very important, Bob, with Marseille algorithm is contextual processing. So the
Mhm.
contextual processing on some game is going to decide there's not much to be done there. And it's going to
Right.
be very similar. The fundamental of the algorithm are the same, no doubt about it.
Well,
However,
just to let you know, in these comparison shots, which I'll be including in the video because I want people to see it, and I
sounds
mean
good.
this in a good way. I want
No, no,
people to see
appreciate,
this.
appreciate.
Like, I have the exact same scene. Like, I started Breath of the Wild and I restored from a save point, and I hit
Nice.
record. So you're looking at the exact same thing. It's a picture of Link. You see his face. You see a detailed outfit. And this is, I use this example because this is absolutely a perfect example of when this is the right tool for the job.
Mm.
This is my opinion. This stuff's all opinion based, but I'd be hard pressed to find anybody that disagreed that this looks very good.
And Bob,
So that when I do these comparisons, it's important that I get it right. I want to present the correct info to
I
people.
appreciate. And another thing, Bob, that we find out that's important to bring up, and I would love for you to do the test as well. What you see is that one thing that's very difficult for me, when we create the content, there is the capture. So you have a capture card and you capture. Ideally, you could capture in 1440p. That's the best because you're going to have like the 1440p. But what we realize, having tons of monitor to Marseille, tons of TVs, where you realize that capturing it's good, but
It's not
ideally
representative of what you're going to see, because if I capture this and I play it back on a shitty bottom of the barrel LCD panel from 10 years ago, that's not what people are gonna see if they spent the
exactly,
money on an
and on
OLED.
top of that, you
Yeah.
play it back on your mobile. That's another topic.
Yeah, that drives me crazy. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten comments that all 3 of these examples look the same. You're just lying for
Ah!
affiliate links, and it's like, "You're watching it on a phone, aren't you?" Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I
So
thought.
so
Okay.
but we realized that even like when so that's why we started to create some video where we not only just do the capture file, but we actually capturing the screen, and it's you can tell the
That's actually what
differences.
I've done for a lot of examples, including showing off your products, is I'll actually take a camera running, with a good prime lens on it and shoot it at an OLED and shoot it at a cheap LCD to show that sometimes
You
even the cheap
can,
LCD
yeah, yeah.
looks good.
So you're
Yeah.
what I'm saying, like then the experience, and I think that's what's really, really important is this time the idea of all this mod is really to take into consideration, what we realize is, for example, it was quite interesting on the LG OLED, right? Uh, if you look at, so you have mode one, mode two, mode three, right? So
Mhm.
green and blue is mode two and three on the, on the Switch, for example, edition. What you realize that there's settings that when you're in game modes, that mod works really well because the picture is completely off, completely dull. Then you go into standard mode, and that mod is not looking best. So now you need to. So what we started to look at, we started to realize that depending on the TV, depending on the game mode or not, there's a lot of fine tuning that is required, and hopefully we make it simple for you to be able to see that in that game with that TV, hands down, this is the mod that I use.
Okay, so is that what you if that was your intent for the mClassic Switch blue mode, was changing the colors around to compensate for people whose game mode or regular modes looks different? Is that because I
That was
couldn't
one.
figure
That
out what
was
the blue mode does.
Yeah, that was one. And the second one was the fact that, now when you talk about picture quality, depending on the TV manufacturers, it's amazing to see the perception. So if you go from China to Japan, it's very different. What is
Yeah.
perceived as looking good versus not. So the sharpening, the brightness of the color, and you can see that they're not performing the same type of processing. And this is where we realize, you know what? One size fits all is not going to cut it. I can't control the display that they have at home. We need to find a way for them to always get the ultimate. But yet, without having to have a PhD, without having to understand the video, by simply changing the mode, you'll be able to hopefully find what works
Okay,
best.
so that's making a lot more sense to me. So
Thank you.
essentially, if people get the mClassic Switch, when they want, turn on the green mode, and if that's smoothing I'm sorry to oversimplify, but if
No,
the
it's fine.
smoothing is kind of what you want to go for, but it doesn't something's off, flip it to the blue mode and see. And if that makes it better,
100%.
cool. But if
100%.
not, stick with the green mode because that's really what the intent of it. And also, you labeled it M Classic Switch, but it's not just for the Switch. It works exactly the same as the Classic. You could put anything into it, right? It's the same as the Classic. I mean,
Correct.
any
Except,
resolution.
except, except that we did a serious effort. Really, in terms of algorithm, all the tuning was we see the M Classic, the original has some interesting things. For example, on the 1080p 24, he will do to 4K. It's more like we're trying to do everything, right?
Hmm.
But you only have one configuration.
Hmm.
The M Classic Switch or the M Classic Retro, the idea behind was that no, okay, now we're gonna simply, you're gonna make it a bit easier for me. I know what's the source expected, and based on the source, we're gonna optimize it for it. But at the end, you're right, a 720p. So for example, a 720p source, you can throw on Xbox 360, but not on the retro because on retro is expected to be 4x3. So we started
Right.
to really narrow, what it does. For me, for example, for Xbox 360, I rather have the original and classic. Now, if I'm going to go and do switch, I'd rather have the mClassic switch. It's the idea behind was for if you don't know Marseille, start with the original, no doubt about it, right? But if you really want, if you really want to get more out of your Nintendo Switch and more knowing that every game are not rendered the same way and your
Mhm.
display is not going to process the same way, mClassic Switch is going to allow you to really have, hopefully, a way better experience by simply toggling the position, whether it's the green, whether it's the blue, or whether it's the default, because the default is the original mClassic.
Yeah. So, when I saw these 2 products, I was very disappointed that you didn't try to go for 4K or for any of the stuff that everybody in the community has been begging for that's just very hard to do because obviously you're the company that does the thing that's hard. You don't do the thing that's easy, you know? So you could have taken a MediaTek chip and just stuck it in there or anything else, and you could have just tweaked their processing, but you did it yourself. So what I think a lot of people were disappointed on was the lack of options going to 4K. Because what I don't know if you've seen the product, the 4K Gamer Pro. It's another device that
Yeah,
looks
of
similar like
course.
yours, but it goes to sharp. Having this a choice between something like, exactly the M Classic Switch green mode, which I definitely like in the right scenarios. Flipping a button and even just having an integer based
There's
sharp
no doubt,
scale might
Bob.
have been a better one.
But there's
Mhm.
no doubt. Bon, the Gamer Pro, unfortunately, I was happy when they came out because like we're trying to make it easier for everybody to do. Now it's unfortunate that it's a hardware limitation. They take the 1080p, they upscale it to 4K. Debatable because at the end now you compete head to head with the upscale of the TV, but why not, right? The problem was that
Yeah.
they're not fixing the problem at the source, and that's what people realized. Said, you know what, you
Well, the
can
the
get it.
actual issue with the 4K Gamer Pro is a lot of people said this looks just like when I turned the sharpness up on my TV, and it
Correct,
doesn't do
correct,
anything
correct.
different.
And I don't want to.
However, not all TVs work the same. Sometimes you turn up the
100%.
sharpness and it looks really bad. So,
Correct, correct. So it fit a purpose, right? Now,
yeah.
now Marseille, it's like, of course, it's very different. We're developing our own chip. So what we're saying there's a real problem at the source. If you don't fix the source, it's not gonna work. So, for example, also another thing which is misunderstood is the 1080p that we create. All pre-processing, the pixel are conditioned to be upscaled. That's why it becomes so much easier for the TV to upscale it to 4K and it looks better. That's something that is misunderstood. However, if you go to, for example, Linus Tech, it will tell you, hands down, for gaming, 1440p is the resolution that I want. So the truth is, TV is starting to finally support 1440p. What we're hoping is to help out everybody to get the 1440p, as many as we can. We're starting to,
Yeah.
you know,
But what you just said is actually much more complicated than that. So 1440p is a good resolution for gaming because it allows for a higher refresh rate for PCs. And this is something that I'm sorry to say this because there's just no other way to say it, but you can't understand unless you've sat. Here's the best example. A friend of mine had a 60 hertz gaming setup and then a 240 hertz gaming setup. Both were outputting 1440p. All of the settings were identical to each other. I played the 60 hertz, played a couple rounds of a fighting game, went and played the 240 hertz one and went, yeah, oh, this is definitely better. But then I went back to the 60 hertz and went, this is crap. I can't believe that's the thing. So when you're talking about resolution versus refresh rate, that's why, in a perfect world, it would be 1440p 1000, but, or 4K, but that's not, you have to work within the limitations of what you're
100%.
going for. So uh, the issue is that I'm trying to find the scenario in which to use these new tools that you've created, and what I'm seeing is that the M Classic Switch is what I would just recommend that people get if they want the
No
smoother
doubt.
look to it. Leave it in green mode and just in case, flip it to blue if you want to double check something. But the retro one, I don't understand where this needs to be applied if you're
I
talking
think,
about 2D
yeah,
graphics.
I think what's clear is that there's so much more that could be done for retro. The only question is and that's going to be good, Bob. I think we can have this as a follow up topic. I think, you know, we're trying to bring a value. We don't want, we're not trying to. there's a lot of interesting company out there doing some adapter. There's a lot of it's good. I'm so happy it exists, and it's nice to see a homegrown business. Little, it's great. I mean, there's no need to go and hijack that. I think what we need to see Marseille, what Marseille can bring as a value that is lacking in the marketplace, and
I
and,
completely agree.
and
And
seeing
there's
and
2
also
paths for that, though. The first path of what you could add is the products that you haven't started shipping yet. So, and then the second path is the next products you could create. So, for the ones that you haven't started shipping yet, have you experimented at all with a sharp scale, a basic integer scale? So, instead of the green mode doing what it's doing now, just taking 480p or 720p and sharp scaling to 1440. I don't know how you'd have to deal with that in an easier mode for 1080p. That gets complicated and stuff like that. But is it too late to just change that mode out or tweak it? Because I'm not the only person to say this. I mean, other reviews have been out, and it just the analysis that I've done is that it seems like there's something broken with the green mode. And I'm not saying that to
I
insult you.
need
I'm
to
saying that
what
because this is my job.
yeah. I think no, 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 no. I think Bob, there's no discussion. That first of all, we love what we do, and the feedback that you're giving is really important to us. I mean, it's not like we're trying to, uh, you know, I'm, I think that in terms of retro, there's, I'm sure there's potentially more to be done. Now, do we need to do another edition? Do we need to do another? We will look into it. There's no doubt about it. I think what we could have more of the retro gaming community engaged, collect the feedback, and seeing if we can afford to go and do a better retro edition, for example. Why not? I think to
But this
me,
one's already set in stone. This one's already being made, and there's no time to tweak
I
it.
think this one has its own value. Time will talk, but in the meantime, we can always look into it. If it's a real issue, I was no doubt about it that it's going to have to be addressed.
Yeah. For future
But at
products,
the
though, I could already tell you right now what nobody else has been talking about doing that movies, TV, and games would all benefit from, much like your original vision of that one product that does everything, is people don't seem to understand about smooth motion and black frame insertion. And even bigger reviewers, like I still see ratings.com refer to it as adding flicker. No one wants to add flicker. That is, I couldn't think of a more missing the point example. One product that everybody would benefit from that would not only help, would support other products that are out there is something that could take up to a 4K 60 input. And with, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Mark from Blurbusters, but he's just open source a world of stuff that you should
okay.
absolutely look into. But at the very basic, you could take a 60 hertz signal, add one black frame between it, and output 4K 60. That alone on an OLED will allow you to have much smoother motion. But when you start talking about movies and TV, now you could do stuff like 24p with 3 frames, then one black. That
Uh-huh.
simulates a 35 millimeter projector. And yeah,
Yeah.
it does get a little bit of flicker. But the upside to that is I've seen on an OLED TV, on a DLP projector, and on a decent LCD. Crappy LCDs don't work well with this, but I've watched older movies where you've turned this mode on, and what looks like film grain fuzz suddenly turns into film grain. It's weird how it tricks your eyes into doing that. But if you can get to higher refresh rates,
Yeah.
Mark from Blurbusters, just the part of the open source thing was CRT beam emulation with simulated phosphor decay. Those are the type of things that we as nerds can talk about and understand. Everybody listening who doesn't understand this stuff is going to go, what the heck are you talking about? Why do you spend all this money to just make it look like a crappy old TV? This is the type of thing that when you sit down in front of an OLED panel and you see this, you immediately understand all of
Yeah,
the motion smoother.
listen, I
So
remain. I mean, of course, I'm getting all the flashback of Inverse when you talk about the 2 by 3 and all this. But listen, we're really aiming for fixing real problem that's going to bring, recreate that experience because of the passion that we have for content, whether it's movie or whether it's game.
mhm.
Your feedback, your recommendation matters, and we need to look into it. And honestly, like I told you, Bob, I was really pleased to discover you by accident. I didn't even know, and it's a pleasant to see people who cares, right? Good or bad feedback. I mean, you know what? I think the mClassic doesn't give justice to this. That's something that can be worked on. I would love to look into it and see if we can do way more. But it's true that it is a challenge because if we really want to go and tape out a chip, there's this massive investment to it. That's the reason why you see all this system. So the
Right.
idea behind is that I'm hoping that we are finding a right balance of something that is going to be plug and play, where you're not going to have to be, and but always bring an edge that is going to allow us, as the enthusiast, as the nerd, as the early adopter, to be able to benefit from it.
Well, I'm annoyingly honest, so this is probably
I
going to annoy
appreciate. I
you,
mean,
but
for me, it's the best. It's that's what we want. But it's
yeah.
the goal is that we're not here like trying to like we care about what we do. That's
Yeah,
it.
and
We
my friends and I are our harshest critics. If anybody saw our private chats, you would think that we were mortal enemies, but no, that's how we make sure we
yeah,
don't release stuff that sucks
yeah.
because,
Of course, and this is how
saying,
you
"Oh,
can
that
do
good job" is useless. Saying, "Oh, that's nice." No, no, useless. I want feedback, I want harsh
yeah.
criticism. I want to be the best that I can at what I do. My friends do as well, and this is why small and bigger companies have me come in to help with
Mm.
stuff like this.
It,
And if you had pitched this to me privately before this was released, I would say market the Switch edition as just the next edition, the next generation. Try to throw another feature in as the last one, but I like it, and I'm still going to
no,
tell
listen,
people
I really
that's the one to buy
honestly,
if you want smoothing.
honestly, I love what I hear from you, and I'm not telling you what you want to hear. I really appreciate it. I think at the end of the day, you know that the original mClassic does some really good stuff. There's a lot of
Right.
flaw, a lot of true benefit. There's no discussion. I mean, it's hard to dislike the mClassic. You can go and pass through if you have an issue with one of the mod that is too smooth, or it's too this, or it's too sharp, or depending on. But I mean, overall, I'm really, really happy about what we've done with the mClassic original. I think the mClassic Retro, it's a first attempt to do something that hasn't been done before. I'm sure we could do so much more from what I'm hearing from you, from other feedback. We were very excited. I was so excited to share it. I think what's to me, it's very clear is the mClassic Switch. You get, it's really, it's a big plus for somebody who is a fan of Switch on a dock play, no discussion. On the retro, more to be done, and also the retro, you're dealing with a community that has been around for the block long. They've got a lot of opinion, and you need to respect it. And the thing is, we need to also, another thing that was, and maybe you could wrap it up on there, but I think that we're trying to make it as a community, trying to build something that hasn't been done before. And I think what the perception was, I was shocked from some influencer who thought that Marseille was that Silicon Valley company that is trying to go after, all this retro adapter company, and that's why we're saying plug and play. But that's really not.
That's dead wrong. So,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
listen,
I mean,
honest to a fault means I defend you too. Not,
I
first of all, your
appreciate.
products have absolutely not ever stepped on other products. And in
No,
fact, your products have sold other products. People have gone out and bought Carbies so that they can use their GameCube through the M cable. So that is
100%.
not at all that's just total bullshit.
Yeah,
What is unfair, but I understand, is when I've heard people say this feels like a scam. What's the retro one doing? And I know that that's not your intention. I know that. But I also understand why that is said, because I personally will still be recommending the original. I'll still recommend the Switch. I can't figure out a single I'm sorry to be rude, but I just can't figure out a scenario in which this would make any experience better. And especially, I just don't understand what's going on with the green mode. And it's not just me. I reached out to other reviewers and said, "Hey,
yeah.
because listen, I'm wrong all the time. Being wrong is easy. All you say is, okay, I fucked up. What did I do wrong? This is how I'm not going to do it again." But no, it's just, so I'm
I
just
think it's
really
gonna
curious
be.
as
I
to
think Bob,
where
what's
that's
gonna
going to
be.
go.
Yeah, listen, I really appreciate. I think that's gonna be important for, and the idea behind it. At the end of the day, the retro has the built-in original mod, so it's not like you're getting the wrong product. But I think what you're saying loud and clear is that there's more that we could do out of this mod if we really want to get more for the retro. There are other settings, there are other things that could be done, and I think we could look into it. We'll have to look into it. At this stage, we really, really need to grow this business to become a reality. And I'm hoping that we collect enough feedback that eventually we can come up with the next chipset and we will kill it. But again
Well,
and
I'm
again,
always here.
it,
And I've been
yeah,
doing this for over a decade. And if you're ready to do any tweaks to
I
this, I can
appreciate
just
Bob.
give you a long list of what people have been asking for.
Yeah.
Because one thing that so many people just don't, I think they get it, but they don't think before they say these things is everything costs so much money. And just saying, "Hey, I just want this other feature." That's why I specifically was asking questions like, "With this chipset, is there still time to tweak?" Not
Yeah.
cancel all production and do another run. I mean, that was your original idea, was being able to tweak a chipset up
Of
until the
course. I
point
mean,
that it ships to
that's why you're killing
customers.
me.
So there you go. This is this is the whole reason your company exists. So capitalize on it. But for the next run of things, you need to be able to make products that people will actually buy. Not 50, not 1,000, but
Uh,
thousands and thousands. Otherwise, you can't pay your bills.
now,
And I don't mean buy your yachts. I mean just put food on your table. So
I
many
mean, of
people
course. I
don't
mean, and yeah,
understand
no,
that.
no doubt, and especially if you wanna have, and the other thing, which is, it's a topic for another call, I guess, but unfortunately, that's how we kill innovation because we can't afford it anymore. In Silicon Valley,
Right.
who is building chip? We are in Silicon Valley. Our neighbors is Nvidia, Intel, AMD. I don't know how we managed, but we survived as a startup to build chip. But who is building chips? All the product become the same chipset,
Yeah.
and so this is why, I mean, it's the early adopter like you, the enthusiast, the nerd, all these. This is critical because of them. Hopefully, we can be able to bring innovation to the mass market. So for me, I listen, I really thank you. I really appreciate everything that you're saying, and being honest is always welcome. What I don't have time for is people who just emotional bullshit. They think that you
Yeah.
scam. They think I don't have time. I was born happy and plenty of energy. I don't have time for the negativity. I think the
Yeah.
feedback you're giving is constructive. I'm sure there are other ways, there are other opportunities where we can give you what you're saying loud and clear. I mean, for retro, we could do more. And maybe we can put our head together and come up with something that retro would love for generation to come. I would love to make it happen. I don't want to commit right now,
No, no, okay, totally
but
understand that.
there's no doubt that I'm telling you, I'm hoping that we can really get, hopefully between the Switch, the original, Le Beetle Retro, we can really grow this to a point where let's reopen the
You could
hood
afford
and
to do
take,
the next
yeah,
thing.
and
Yeah.
take out the chipset that, for generation to come, will all benefits come from.
And I mean, that's gotta be the goal of the next products, is to take what you've done to a next level, and that you have a product that nobody else was doing it.
Yeah.
You put nobody out of business. You grew
No,
other businesses based on that one, but also one of the reasons that I truly believe you were able to sell so many is it crossed many different platforms. So that's the next product. Movies, TV, video games, do something nobody else is doing that supports the other
100%.
work. There's a very clear path to what you could do, but I just hope you sell a ton of the mClassic
I
Switch
appreciate,
editions to
man.
be able to fund that. So
I no, you got it, brother. You got it.
cool.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your time and your patience. And, I'm looking forward to doing another one of these and following up and seeing what you have
Sounds
up
good,
your
brother.
sleeve.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Bob. Take care.